Today on Callout, Whistler search and rescue long lines an injured snowmobiler off a steep mountainside.
It doesn't look possible to do a heli hopper, so we will be doing a long line rescue, a HETS mission here.
And later, expert trackers Darcy and Bart Bjorkman race against time to find hidden hiker Callie Chatten.
I've taken myself on a little walk to get lost and see if they can find me.
Wednesday, 2:37 p.m. Whistler Search and Rescue was called out to help extricate an injured snowmobiler. The injured subject is Virginia Smith, a Whistler resident and self-described Djinn of all trades, who works as a horse farrier, go-go dancer, bartender, model, stunt woman. The list goes on. A highly experienced snowmobiler, Virginia has crashed her sled and is trapped on a very steep incline, terrified to move for fear that she has a broken neck.
I have just notified my rescue team members to be on standby, get their gear ready. I am on my way to the staging area to prepare for the helicopter landing.
A helicopter travels to the top of Whistler Mountain to pick up pro ski patrollers Darren Romano and Kevin Sebald. Brad Sills is picked up near his Callahan Valley ski resort. The three-person rescue team, with pilot Steve Gray, have more than 60 years of experience in mountain rescue. Their destination? Brandywine Mountain. Located in the southern coast mountains of British Columbia, the Brandywine Valley is a favorite spot for outdoor recreationists and can attract well over 100 snowmobilers on any given day during the season. The sport of snowmobiling is a lot of fun, but it can be deadly. The practice of high marking, riding up to the highest point possible on a steep mountain slope, can lead to a yard sale, both sled and rider tumbling down the mountain. And that's just the lucky ones. In the wrong place at the wrong time, the weight and torque of these powerful machines will easily set off avalanches, burying the rider. And then there's the simple factor of speed versus terrain. The Brandywine Valley has its own special challenge, the S-Chute.
It's very steep, probably in the neighborhood somewhere between 40 and 45 degrees, depending on the time of the year. And about halfway up the chute at about probably 600 to 700 vertical feet, it has a dog's leg marked with a large rock in the middle of it. And you have to turn quite radically one way or the other to get around this rock. Meanwhile, keeping full power on, because if you don't, you'll start flipping and you'll roll right to the bottom of the chute.
The team arrives on site. They can see Virginia lying in the S-Chute, comforted by friends.
I was a mess. I've been laying there for about 2.5 hours. I was starting to get very cold. I was starting to shake. I was crying a little. I was breathing heavy. I was pretty much having a full-on panic attack.
Virginia recounts how her accident occurred.
I hit an ice chunk and I went right into the rock, and the snowmobile came back. I got kicked off the back of it and it started to cartwheel down. I could feel it and hear it coming down behind me, and then it impacted right on my back. It rolled right over the back of my head, and then I slid for about 30 feet and then I stopped. And I decided not to move. There was a million things running through my mind with the amount of pain that I had. I was almost already looking into the future. You know, how long is this going to be to recover? You know, what's going to happen to me? Because I knew that I wasn't going to be able to get out of there by myself. And then I heard the helicopters come in.
The rescue team circles the area to assess the situation and develop a rescue plan.
We did our initial checks, wind speeds, wind direction, sun angles, atmospheric density, are there downdrafts? Most of the avalanche activity had already occurred. We did look at a technique called heli hover, in which the pilot will keep full power on the helicopter and will come into a very close hover, somewhere between 2 to 8 feet above the ground. But the steepness of the slope and the fact that we had no way of telling whether snowmobilers could enter the slope, and once they were in the slope, they're powerless to stop. It's that steep. They would come down, and of course, if we were trying to load somebody, they'd come right into the rotor system, and we would all have a very bad day. In fact, a snowmobile came over the top and stopped when he saw the subject, took off his helmet, and we were able to yell at him if he would mind becoming a sentry. And he performed that duty, which was a great relief to all of us.
The rescue proceeds. Medical team leader Kevin Sebald is dropped off above the S-chute and skis down to Virginia with a spinal board.
I was in quite a bit of shock at that point.
How are we doing?
I was sure that I had broken my neck from the amount of pain that I was feeling. I had heard crunching and cracking when the sled rolled over my head. He reassured me that everything was going to be okay and that he had a crew put together and we're going to put you on a spinal board and he was going to get me out of there and everything was going to be fine. I felt very safe.
Coming down your shoulder now, shoulder's okay.
Because the area is too steep for either a tow out by snowmobile or to hover the helicopter and load Virginia in, they opt for a HETS mission, lifting Virginia out using a long line.
We will be doing a long line rescue, a HETS mission here. Darren is getting dressed to be on the end of the line, and I will be spotting.
That's Kevin calling.
Okay, Brad, we're doing quite well. I've got a bench shoveled out here. Our scene is looking fairly secure, and we're ready anytime.
Yeah, roger that. We're just finishing up the configuration here. Darren will come off the line with the ARP and assist you in loading her, and then ETA about 5 minutes.
Copy that. Sounds good, Brad.
The helicopter circles while Darren and Kevin attach a cervical collar to keep Virginia's spinal column properly aligned during transport.
It's gonna be okay.
Cinched to a spinal board and bundled in the ARP, Virginia is packaged and ready for delivery to the hospital. It's not all that comfortable, but it is safe.
I was pretty much packaged up like a burrito. It was completely dark and I could hear the helicopters coming in, but I couldn't see them.
The helicopter returns and picks them up.
Normally we fly with our back to the wind once he brings it up to speed, and we wear a flight helmet with a boom mic on it. And we've got hand signals that we use. There's always direct communication to the helicopter pilot. If we start to spin a little bit, we can put an arm out to stop us from spinning. It's just a matter of floating and just let the helicopter pilot do all the work.
Darren was incredible. He held my hand the whole way as we were taking off. But the spinning was what was really getting to me. The slow spin, just the sound of the helicopter. It was, it's just a lot to take in one day.
She was a little bit nervous when we kind of did a big spin in the air. I was talking to her as we were flying, and her hand started to wiggle out a bit, so I just held her hand for a minute, and she said that felt better.
Virginia is lowered to the ground, where she will be moved to the awaiting medevac helicopter.
We're inbound.
Yeah, he needs to notify EHS and the clinic. How was that, Virginia? Could you see anything?
No, it was all dark.
Yeah.
Hold the hand.
Yeah.
Starbase for anyone rescue.
Yeah,
chief complaint, like cervical 3, 4, 5 area.
So that concludes a successful mission here. Patient is now in the medevac helicopter. She will be transported to Whistler Clinic at this time.
The helicopter lifts off carrying a very thankful Virginia Smith.
They were amazing. I was really impressed on how organized they were and how relaxed they made me feel. They were all very friendly and very professional, and I'm really glad we have them.
Virginia is bruised and torn, but she'll recover fully with a new perspective.
I have a great urge to get back out on my snowmobile. It's really fun to see what your machine can do, how far you can go. I have a great time with it because I'm really light and I have a very powerful machine, and I can usually out high mark the guys, and I think that's the thrill of it for me, is the fact that, you know, I can go up there and kind of show them up, whereas a lot of sports are very male dominated. I just feel like I learned a big lesson, and I think that I might have been pushing it a little bit more than I should have, and it really was a wake-up call that I have many, many more years of sledding in front of me, and I'm just going to play it safer.
Now, trackers Darcy Fear and Bart Bjorkman have 3 hours and 5 square kilometers to locate hidden hiker Callie Chatten.
Found a perfect spot to hide out. I just need to get myself up to these bluffs.
Thursday, 12:31 p.m. Expert trackers Bart Bjorkman and Darcy Fear are called out to search for a missing hiker. Callie Chatten was reported overdue when she failed to return from a morning stroll through the woods near her friend's farm, where she was visiting.
We know that the young lady has gone on this trail. It's a well-used trail. Darcy's up behind me now trying to establish her footprints.
This is an exercise. The two trackers, Bart and Darcy, with more than 30 years tracking experience between them, will attempt to find Callie, a Nelson Search and Rescue Team member. The trackers will follow Callie's tracks through 5 square kilometers of varied terrain until they find her. They've got 3 hours. But Callie isn't going to make this easy for them. With a 30-minute head start, she will attempt to elude the two experts, trying her best not to leave any clues along the way.
I've taken myself on a little walk to get lost and see if they can find me.
Bart and Darcy move to the top of the hill from the subject's last known position and make their first important discovery in a track trap, a soft patch of ground likely to capture a shoe sole impression.
What we're seeing here is a fairly good print, as prints go for us. You can actually see the outline of the toe here and some of the pattern of the sole. What Darcy has done is he's measured from the heel to the toe, the width of the heel, and the length of the heel. He's also drawn in his picture all of these different formations or patterns of the tread.
These measurements are compared to the known size and brand of the subject's shoes, as well as any other information gathered from interviews with family and friends.
We got the length is right to 10 3/4 inches, 4 1/4 wide, so it's a female hiker boot for sure.
This is their prime sign, the signature print they'll use to find Callie, and will help establish her initial direction of travel.
I think we'll follow her up this trail and see where she goes across this field.
The trackers mark the print with surveyor's tape to prevent contamination, then set the stride length and length of the footprint on the tracking sticks using elastics.
One of the things we do when we're tracking is to identify the stride length. The stride length is the distance between the toe of one foot and the heel of the next. The second thing we do is we put the footprint on our stick. So this would be the stride, this would be the footprint length. By putting this down on top of the footprint that we can find, we know that the stride is roughly this distance. We can actually pivot our stick back and forth and figure out roughly where the next footprint should be. And sometimes, because we're dealing with such small evidence, this is really the only way that we can actually figure out where the next footprint's going to be. It's just basically a direction of travel device.
You see the west.
Establishing direction of travel can narrow the search area significantly.
Trackers are usually called in at the very beginning of a search. The reason being is by having trackers go in and establish direction of travel, search managers can actually look at a topographical map and see where the most natural places for people to walk.
A lost subject can travel at an average pace of 3 kilometers per hour, which continually increases the size of the search area. By establishing a direction of travel and considering the most likely areas a person would walk, a search area this big can be narrowed down to focus on an area this big. It's now 45 minutes into the search, and the tracking team has hit a roadblock, a hard-packed field that shows no sign.
At 250 pounds, if I step on the ground, there's really no pattern. There's nothing you can see there. So what we're going to do is Darcy's going out about 20 meters and he's going to cut for sign. He's actually going to cut across the top of the field, hopefully finding where the young lady walked through.
Cutting is a common practice, with one or more tracker teams searching ahead while one stays on prime. If one of the sign-cutting teams finds a new prime sign, they become the primary team, and the other teams leapfrog ahead, and so on. This speeds up the search and helps to continually refine the subject's direction of travel. As he cuts, Darcy drags a stick in the ground, thereby distinguishing his tracks from other sign.
Because we have a large field here, what we'd look for too is what we call shine or flagging. Shine is just basically what we see when the lighter sides of the plant or the foliage will show up, and the sun will actually shine on it differently than it will the darker plants along either side. The other thing too is the flagging is the way the grass is bent down. So in this particular case, you can see that the direction of travel was this way.
The cutting pays off. They find more sign on the northwest side of the field.
We can see a little bit of a toe dig here, and it lines up with our stick. There's another toe dig here, another one here, a big one here. It's definitely not animal, but it lines up with our stick from toe to heel.
It's turning into a beautiful day to get myself lost. Sun's coming out, at least a wee bit, and found a perfect spot to hide out. I just need to get myself up to these bluffs, see if I can find a good vantage spot.
As Callie settles into her hiding place, the tracker team works their way towards some woods, finding more sign in the softer earth.
What do we got here? What's the next one here? That ain't no deer. That's a lug.
There's lugs.
That looks like it's heel.
What we have to do as trackers now is what we call make or break this line of sign. We have to follow along and see, because it could be a hunter, it could be anybody. What we have to do is see if we can actually find some proof that it's actually our person, our lost person.
The team is definitely back on track as they follow Callie's sign into a forested area.
Fresh break, and you can almost see the whole footprint here. Just crunched everything. All these plants have been broken off fresh. This is definitely not elk, this is human. Stepped right here.
Yeah, I got something real good here.
Bart and Darcy pick up speed now, narrowing the gap as they find sign after sign.
Oh, stand by.
They must be getting close to finding Callie.
See, that looks like lugs kind of.
Yeah, there's a lot of disturbance right up there. But look at this here as well.
Yeah, I see that. No, I don't think that's her. No, I think it's too small for her.
Absolutely. This has all been pulled back. If this was pulled apart, that's her toe.
I can definitely hear their voices, and I can see them just coming into one of the clearings through the trees, so they're definitely on my track.
The trackers make their way down an old logging road. Callie's footprints are well defined in the soft soil.
Hey guys! Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Callie is found after 2 hours of searching. In the end, Bart and Darcy followed her tracks across 2 fields and through a forest till they found her. Had this been a real search, the search manager would have employed numerous sign-cutting teams working ahead to continually refine the subject's direction of travel. Ground SAR members would also be on scene searching areas of high probability and calling out for the lost person. Callie shows the trackers her route across the field.
I saw some prints right here, right?
Tracking is one of these things like you're not born to it. It's just a learned skill. So it's just a matter of getting the right training and then doing lots of practice from there.
Callout Search and Rescue features real stories, filmed live by search and rescue teams during actual missions. Find out more at calloutsar.tv. Today on Callout, Nelson Search and Rescue hunt for a missing two-seater vintage aircraft.
We're looking for a very small airplane.
And later, a crash course in air accident investigation.
It's important for us to identify if there was any mechanical malfunction or eliminate it.
Wednesday, 8 p.m. Nelson Search and Rescue was called out to launch a ground search for an overdue plane. The aircraft is being flown by 83-year-old Ian Gordon Smith, a recreational pilot with over a decade of flying experience. The plane they're searching for is a vintage single-engine two-seater Ercoupe. First manufactured in 1939, the Ercoupe was designed to be the safest fixed-wing aircraft of its time. Mr. Smith had restored the plane and had flown it for the past 10 years. The plane had taken off from Vulcan, Alberta, stopping in Cranbrook to refuel, then continuing on to Kelowna. Slated to arrive at 5 p.m., Mr. Smith was reported overdue by Kelowna Air Traffic Control, and the search began. A number of people report seeing the plane earlier in the day over a mountainous, heavily forested area near Crawford Bay on the east shore of Kootenay Lake, about 40 kilometers northeast of Nelson. Search aircraft scour the Crawford Bay area for 3 hours, with no sign of the missing plane or signs of a crash, such as broken branches or trees. But as dusk approaches, a weak emergency locator transmitter, or ELT signal, is received. That's when Nelson Search and Rescue is called in to do a ground search.
Search and rescue military had already been out on it. It's their jurisdiction. The aircraft, they believed, may have gone down in an area that was more suitably accessed by ground search and rescue.
To get to Crawford Bay, the team must take a ferry. SAR manager Murray Springman uses the opportunity to do a mission briefing, which includes addressing one of the possible outcomes.
By the way, the subject is deceased. As you all know, you can protect the body, but you do not move the body until the coroner has given approval.
This road will take us right to where that plane mark is on the Google Earth.
A maze of logging roads leads them into the Crawford Bay area. It's pouring rain. The team has to clear a fallen tree from the road.
There's two trails that intersect here. One to the left, one to the right. One goes down.
They reach the location and are hopeful to find the plane just off the road in one of the open clear-cut areas. They do a hasty search, scanning the easy areas first, aiming to reach the pilot as quickly as possible.
Which way?
To the back of this cut block.
Well, they didn't see anything.
The team regroups for a more detailed search of the area. This can be hazardous in the dark. Some areas have cliffs, others have dense shrubs and trees. Some are more open. The location is broken down into 4 main grids. The teams carefully walk each grid within sight of one another. They flag the search locations with SAR tape as they go to avoid missing any ground. Aircraft continue to fly overhead using searchlights to spot the plane. Four hours later, nothing. The team calls it a night at 3 a.m. and heads back to a nearby hotel where they'll stay and resume searching in the morning. It's now day 2. It has been determined that the weak ELT signal detected on day 1 was only radio interference. More SAR teams have joined the search.
We have 5 search teams here today: Kimberley, Cranbrook, Beaver Valley, Nelson, and Castlegar, and we've got a total of 37 people. And we're expecting the arrival of sleds to go into possible avalanche territory, though, so we've got Avitex on those teams.
New information has surfaced. Search coordinators have pinged the pilot's cell phone, sending a signal to it from the cell provider. The phone has sent a signal back. The Ercoupe is definitely 11.48 kilometers from the Pilot Point cell tower, somewhere in a 9-kilometer wide path. Normally, the search would move out in all directions from the last sighted location. Now, all the eggs are in one basket as they comb a single area, Grey Creek Pass. But it's still a needle in a haystack search. Grey Creek Pass is notorious, with a number of small plane crashes occurring here in past years. Small planes use the pass to cut between the East and West Kootenay Mountains. If they encounter poor visibility or bad weather here, pilots will turn back in the tight bowl-shaped area, lose too much airspeed in the turn, and the plane could crash. SAR teams on snowmobiles start searching Grey Creek Pass.
We had sent out a hasty team up there to, see where the snow line was and how far we could access up the valley, how we could search it.
We've probably had about 3 to 4 inches of snow that's fallen overnight, and we're looking for any indication of an aircraft crashing here. The helicopter's been working this area for well over an hour now. They're not finding much, but who knows? We're looking for a very small airplane that's possibly covered in snow. That could be in some very thick brush.
By now, it's late afternoon. With 24 hours of alpine exposure, recent snow and rain, and likely injury, the pilot's chances for survival have dropped dramatically. The team calls it a day, planning for an early morning start. Friday morning, day 3 in the search for a missing plane.
Surface fractures on the rolls there, you see that?
Aircraft, snowmobiles, and snowshoeing teams will all comb Grey Creek Pass today. This is avalanche territory. Dave Smith, an avalanche technician with over 20 years' experience, works ahead of the teams.
Just trying to look at the safety factor for the searchers, and some of whom will be up near tree line, and we want to make sure that they're not straying into an area of hazard or potential avalanche hazard.
He checks the strength of the various layers. A strong layer below may act as a sliding surface for the snow on top, especially if a weak layer lies in between.
There's nothing really volatile here, nothing too touchy.
The helicopter arrives. It settles, but stays powered up to avoid sinking into the snow and getting stuck. For the remainder of the day, the helicopter will deposit search teams into various parts of Grey Creek Pass, all the while searching for the downed aircraft. At 4 p.m., the team starts pulling back to debrief. Still no sign of the missing plane from ground or air. Saturday morning, day 4 in the search for the missing plane. A warming trend increases avalanche danger in Grey Creek Pass. The ground teams have already done everything they can and stand down. The air search continues, going over Grey Creek Pass again and again. One broken treetop is spotted. They lower a SAR tech down through the canopy to investigate. The plane, along with the deceased pilot Ian Gordon Smith, has been found. The downed plane was found exactly where the cell ping had determined. It had been flown over several times, but snow cover made it very difficult to spot. It is now 3 months later. Chris Armstrong is on his way to Crawford Bay to meet Mardell Chinook, the daughter of the deceased pilot, Ian Gordon Smith.
The family of Mr. Smith has come out from Alberta. They've asked to see if they can get out to the actual crash site. going to meet up with him here pretty soon and head up into Great Creek Pass, see how close we can get to the actual crash site.
Hi, I'm Chris. Chris, I'm Rod, and this is Mardell.
Hi.
Hello.
Nice to meet you. Pleased to meet you. So we're going to go for a little jaunt and see if we can find the location?
Okay.
I just want to find a spot where we're the closest point from the road to the crash site. Shouldn't be too much further here. So you see that ridge that runs kind of in the middle here? Basically, you follow that straight up. 2,300 vertical feet from here.
I felt his journey as we were, driving along the highway. I knew that he had been flying along that highway. To be flying at 83 years old by himself in his own plane, I think says it all, but that's the kind of person he was, just a free spirit.
We've been in for about an hour. We're just under halfway up.
When we were making the journey here yesterday, I felt a lot of happiness from him, that, it was good for him. So for me, I think this is going to be closure.
Well, this is the spot. I knew Transport Canada was coming up here, and they've taken away the fuselage maybe in the last 2 or 3 days. There's 2 top trees here. Came in here. The rest of the debris pile that we've seen, broken plexiglass, a battery, lots of odds and ends, is all strewn through the trees that way.
It's just really hard. But at least we found it. I think I hear my dad saying, "Atta girl." He did say it was a chip off the old block once.
When you spend days looking for somebody and you don't find them, it rattles around in your head. You want to be successful. Long after the subject's plane was found, emails flying around constantly. People wanted to know where he was found, what was the location, what was the long and lat, because they all want to go in Google Earth and see where they searched and how far he was from your search area. It's pretty important. You put all that effort, you got a lot of pride in what you do. People want to know. You get pretty pumped up. You want the closure.
Now, aviation investigators search for clues to the Erkoop's crash.
Along its descent, it had slashed through another tree vertically.
A plane crashes in the wilderness of British Columbia. Four days later, search and rescue find the wreckage. The 1946 two-seater Erkoop was found in 4 pieces, spread out over 300 meters, a relatively small area for a plane crash. What caused the crash? Unraveling the mystery is the job of aviation investigators.
We've got to look at everything. We've got to look at the environment, the weather, good or bad. What was the aircraft intended to do? The pilot, the human in the picture. It's important for us to identify if there was any mechanical malfunction or eliminate it.
This is an inside look at how aviation investigators piece together the clues and find the answers. In this case, the coroner has requested the Transportation Safety Board's assistance in determining the cause of death.
Many times what we'll do is try and get an impression of the aircraft at the moment of impact. What was the pilot trying to do?
All facets are examined. What was the weather like when the Erkoop disappeared?
There was no real severe turbulence forecasted for the area. There were, however, certain types of clouds, such as towering cumulus cloud, which are conducive to some turbulence.
The investigators try to get to the site as soon as possible, before weather can wash away any markings on the terrain.
Markings in the snow are one of these things that we look at, impact with trees and scarring on rocks.
In this case, it had already rained and snowed, but the crash site still had a story to tell.
Well, when we initially reached the accident site and we overflew it and examined the treetops, the fact that there was not a lot of tree damage indicated that they had to have come down almost vertically.
The propeller had signs of power at impact.
The engine being forward of the whole wreckage was an indication that it was powered. Also, along its descent, it had slashed through another tree vertically. That's another indication that the propeller is turning.
Knowing that the engine was powered eliminates a number of factors from the crash.
If we had an indication that there was no power, then we have to start looking at why was there no power? Was there fuel? Was there a malfunction in the engine? Did it just suffer from the environment? We can make some leaps when we get a good indication of power.
They bring the wreckage back to their warehouse to look at other possible factors. It's not in thousands of pieces like a large jet crash could be, but the same investigation principles apply.
Behind me here we have the wreckage of the air coupe, which we've recovered to this inspection facility so that we could lay it out and have a better appreciation for how the air coupe was damaged in flight or from impact with the ground.
A closer look at the propeller supports the theory that the plane was powered.
As the propeller tries to pull itself through the air, it tends to want to pull itself forward. And as it was pulling itself forward, it's also left some indications through score marks here that it is in fact rotating at that point in time.
As engine components lose lubrication, heat will cause failure. If it's unclear whether or not the engine was running at the time of the crash, they will look at the magnetic chip plug. This device attracts metal particles in the engine oil that have been worn from various engine parts. If the engine can't be run, they will tear it down for a closer look.
We can determine whether the material came from bearings, pistons, connecting rods, because their chemical composition is often very different.
A plane's instruments can be revealing, sometimes showing the speed or rate of descent at impact.
Instrument dials will have a needle that when impact occurs will slap against the back of the instrument dial and leave an imprint or an indent or some kind of transfer of paint.
The antique air coupe's flight instruments were vacuum powered.
As the wings separated, the vacuum tube system also separated.
When the vacuum system detached, the instruments failed, leaving no clues. Warning lights on the instrument panel alert the pilot to engine problems. They also provide clues for investigators. If a warning light bulb was on during impact, the filament will be more elongated than a cold, brittle filament. There were no warning lights, and the air coupe was powered. But were the flight controls working?
One of the considerations during the examination has to do with finding whether the aircraft's flight controls were continuous, meaning that everything was attached and capable of functioning in flight. We'll look at the control column, for example, its linkages right through. If we find that any of the controls, for example, are fractured, we'll look at how they fractured and determine whether they're a pre-existing condition.
Though the controls are broken, a closer look shows that the components were functional before impact. They were not a factor in the crash. The most important clues may lie in the wings.
Did the wings break off before impact? Did they get hit by a tree? So we're looking at leading edge damage.
A dent or deformation in the wing can show a plane's angle of descent at the time it impacted an object. In this case, they didn't find substantial leading edge damage, which suggests the wings had already broken off before impact. Both wings had snapped off right where they meet under the fuselage. But why?
We determined that we had better have a closer look at the fracture surfaces.
A fracture surface is the area where a break occurs. It can shed light on whether the metal has been overloaded by outside forces or fatigued over time by corrosion or wear.
Fatigue failures are distinct in that they often will show a type of beaching mark, which shows that there's been a progression in the failure.
The main structure of the wings, known as the front spars, are the strongest parts of the wings.
When we look at this fracture surface, we note that there is very pronounced bending right to the ultimate failure of this material. It is consistent with an overload event.
The investigators can now paint a picture of the events based on all the facts they have determined. The plane was powered and the controls were working. It was unlikely that there was severe turbulence. The wings fractured due to a structural overload.
The most likely scenario we could come up with was that the pilot somehow had exceeded, through a full deflection of the flight controls, the structural limitations of the wing.
The plane plummeted almost vertically and left a limited field of wreckage. A plane traveling at relatively high speed, as in a dive, can cause structural failure of its wings, either by pure aerodynamic drag or by a maneuver that adds forces beyond the wing's design strength. The wing spars of the Ercoupe showed damage consistent with the maneuver that resulted in disaster. Investigators can't speculate about possible reasons. They try to find answers and make safety recommendations. The facts and conclusions of this crash investigation will go into a letter to the coroner.
It's a team effort, and we're trying to make sure that there's no facts that we haven't assessed. We hope that knowledge will allow all those involved in the industry to avoid the risks that are out there.
Callout Search and Rescue features real stories filmed live by search and rescue teams during actual missions. Find out more at calloutsar.tv.